Welcome back, everyone. Oz here, and today I've got an episode of Boomers Being Fools for you all. This one's a bit interesting, because for the first time we actually have a boomer who might actually be in the right, so stay tuned for that one. Anyways, as per usual, I'll be giving my opinions, and I hope you give yours down below. And without further ado, let's hop right in. Axelwayne. Boomer neighbor wants to tell me how to use my property, so I tell him to stop using it. Boomer story. A few years ago, I lived in a boomer subdivision. In the 4 years we lived there, I would take my girls on walks, and there were 2 other families in the entire subdivision with kids. The rest were all retirees and angry, still working boomers. When the kids would ride their bikes in the road, we'd get yelled at for being in the road. When they rode on the sidewalks, we'd get yelled at for being on the sidewalk. If they picked a dandelion from a yard, we'd get yelled at for messing with their landscaping. Everyone was so entitled. So my neighbor was an old retired army man who did whatever he wanted, and people never said no apparently. He didn't like the trash pickup because it would damage his lawn, so he would just put his carts on my property. He would get political signs and put them in my property. His fence was too short on the side of his house to have a gate, so we had one on the side facing my property and would take everything through my yard, including his four-wheelers, his lawnmower, etc. I'm of the opinion that a yard is just a yard, so I don't really care, but I had my trees maintained professionally, had lawn care, kept my yard mowed, and generally didn't pay much attention to his complaints other than to say, okay, I'll keep an eye on that. Now, you see, my wife has absolutely no spatial awareness and is a terrible parker. She's the type that pulls forward into a parallel spot and leaves the tail sitting halfway out on the edge of oncoming traffic and thinks that's okay. The type that pulls into a spot and somehow gets wheels on every line. The type that, at our house, would pull into or out of our 3-wide slanted empty driveway but still always found a way to take one wheel through the grass, resulting in a ground-up mud spot right at the bottom of the driveway where it met the sidewalk. This was it. This was the most terrible thing that my boomer neighbor could imagine happening. One day, mid-November, I got home from picking up the kids from school, and my oldest, 7 at the time, hops out and saw him putting up one of those electric trees in the front yard for Christmas time. His wife was super sweet, and she wanted it, so he would do it even though he hated to do anything remotely joyful. My daughter, standing on my driveway because I told her not to approach them unless they use the sidewalk, told him how she loves the lights when they put them up. He immediately rages at her and then comes up to me on my driveway with my arms full and tells me that he won't be having any more of that mud, and it's making his yard a mud pit and women shouldn't drive anyways. And if I won't fix my wife's driving, and he'll just get a truckload of rocks and dump them on my driveway, so we won't use it anymore. I'm already livid at him, yelling at my child, but I happen to have had enough of his complaining a couple months ago and had gotten an official survey, so I tell him to stay right there. We'll talk more in a minute. So I take the girls inside, get the extra copy of the survey I had just for the occasion, and take it outside and hand it to him. I then explain how he can feel free to dump as much rock as he wants on his own property, but I take a few steps forward onto the lawn and show him exactly where the line ends. I then tell him if he takes one step over the line from now on, I'll have him trespassed. I then point out that his gate butts up against the actual property line so he can't use it anymore, and that my driveway is mine and he can't use it anymore, and that if his trash bins end up on my yard again, I'll call the city and have them removed and he can go down and get new ones. Now he's beet red and tells me I can't tell him what to do with his gate, and how is he supposed to mow the lawn or get his four-wheelers out? I just shrug and tell him, try me. That was the last time we ever spoke. About a year later, some guys came out to do some work on his house and they were going up my driveway and I told them no, you have to use his property, and gave them the history. I could tell they were annoyed at me for making their life harder, but they ended up having to drive their big-ass lifter through his lawn and ground up all of his grass, going up and down that hill multiple times, and honestly, it just felt good watching his lawn become a mud pit. We moved a couple months later, and though now it feels petty, before we left, I left a card at his house that said we appreciated how kind his wife was and hoped his new neighbors would treat him with as much care and respect as he had afforded us. I saw him at Home Depot this morning looking grumpy as ever, and it made me want to post. And it was in that moment that he finally learned that his actions have consequences. Yeah, he fucking deserves that for yelling at a child, seriously. Wow, those Christmas lights are really pretty. Fuck you, kid. Oh, by the way, your wife shouldn't be driving because she's a woman. Like, dude, what were you expecting? Good on him for standing up for his family and actually putting shit in perspective. I do find it funny they moved out a couple months later and, oh, the icing on the cake of the lawn being turned to mulch by a contracting company. Oh, that's just wonderful. And that's the thing. If he was nicer, I'm sure that the homeowner would not have had a single problem with them using his driveway in the instance. But it's amazing how things can eventually turn right back around and bite you in the ass. Glittering Major 4871. Boomer gave my son with celiac food with weed on purpose. Boomer story. 9-year-old son went to a sleepover. Because he's celiac, I purposefully packed snacks and breakfast for him. His friend lives with his parents and granddad, and as soon as the granddad hears about the allergy, he starts going on about how these allergies didn't exist when he was a kid and blah blah blah. I show up the next morning and my son is throwing up green. The mom apologetically tells me that the granddad purposely switched the breakfast to one with wheat. I'm normally mild-tempered, but I did yell at him, and he can't let go that I used an F-bomb. Anyways, the mom apologizes a few more times and I spend the rest of the day nursing my son back to health. Update. I spoke to the mom and she agreed I should press charges. We're pretty good friends. I feel she's pretty sick of his BS too, and this was the last straw for her as well. See, I know that he knows he's in the wrong when his main concern is the F-bomb. He's trying to find a reason where he can find the moral high ground on this, and it's the fact that, well, it doesn't matter that I poisoned your son. You used the F-bomb while yelling at me. That makes me the victim here, not you. Also, kudos to their parent for actually stepping up for, her friend's son and, not putting up with the bullshit. She probably realized really quick that there could be some serious charges put against her, and yeah. My only problem is the moment that she found out that there was an issue and wheat was fed to the kid, there should have been a call placed immediately to the mother. But besides the point, I'm happy the son is okay. Rico Pico got yelled at for using Control+F, also known as the find hotkey. Boomer story. I'm working for a small family business owned by boomers while I go back to school. They have some unusual ways of doing things and are generally fearful of technology. To track employee time off, they have a spreadsheet with every day of the year along the top row, oh no, and a list of employees going down the column on the left. They were showing me how to use This is a large spreadsheet, so I use Control+F to find the employee in the list. Ensue frantic yelling. Don't do that! Scroll! Scroll! I ask why, to which they respond, I just don't like that. I explain how Control+F works, which they are not interested in. They go on to explain to me that it will delete something. It is at this point that I learn they spend hours manually entering every day of the year into the spreadsheet and are afraid I will delete some of those dates. I stand up from the desk and politely offer them the driver's seat so they can scroll to their heart's content, which they gladly accept. Okay, look, real quick, part of my background, back before I switched over to doing YouTube, is I used to do software development. And my first job was I used to do database architecture and having I'm trying to think of how to put this in simple terms here. I used to make software that would pull data from an SQL database, and SQL is just a language that's used to query a database, and convert that into either PDF or Excel depending on what the user wanted. Eventually this turned into PowerPoint and a lot of other god-awful things that I don't want to talk about, but yeah. That software was designed for essentially boomers in the military. And the amount of times that we got questions and support tickets based around Microsoft Excel and its usage and not our software was... oh my god. Look, anyways, all I'm saying is this is extra painful because I've worked with boomers and technology and this shit can get messy. Now also, I do want to add that I understand that not everyone is technologically literate, especially with new technologies. But I, someone who in high school was forced to become Microsoft certified within their Office suite, from Access to Excel to PowerPoint to Word, all those things essentially getting me ready for the workplace. This was a graduation requirement for my high school. If a boomer is trying to show me something and I have an easier way that can save them hours and I try to show them and they tell me, no, you don't know what you're doing, I don't know if I would want to continue that job if I'm going to be honest with you. There is nothing wrong with being technologically illiterate, but when someone wants to help you, don't push them away. Where am I? 312. This one's coming from a Gen X. Using Control-X or Control-V is hacking, got reported to boss. I initially posted this as a reply to a great post from yesterday. This is the Control-F post, but felt it had enough potential that it could possibly stand on its own as its own post, edited very slightly for context. Reading yesterday's post brought up some deep-seated PTSD from a job I had about a decade, 10 years ago for people who are saying I can't math, ago. Some old bitch sat in the cubicle next to me. Let's call her Virginia, because that was her name. Complained to my boss that I was hacking because I was regularly using Control-C, X, and V to copy-paste things, or Control-Tab to navigate tables. This old baddie would take the mouse and click to go from field to field. I may be a lot of things, asshole is one of them, but computer virgin I am not. I used to work in hospital pharmacy in the late 90s, early 2000s on terminal-based systems. Oh god. There was no GUI, graphical user interface. Hell, there wasn't even a mouse. You must learn the keyboard shortcuts. But since she was 50 years older than I swear she was like 900 years old, I must clearly be cheating. The fact that I, a 35-year-old pharmacist at the time, was more proficient in the medical record computer system than she was, despite her 40 years of company service, remained a complete alien concept to her tiny, smooth little brain. The boss did come by, stared at me for a while, and just walked away shaking his head. He never brought it up during our one-on-ones, but this wasn't the first time that horrible woman tried to throw me under the bus for, check notes, doing my job. Boomers don't understand that some younger people actually have a work ethic. We just prefer to work smarter, not harder. If we were in the Dark Ages, she'd probably try to have me burned as a witch. Fuck you, Virginia. You are the reason your husband left you with your kids and you don't see your grandchildren. Oh my god. I feel much better for getting this off my chest. So, because I went to a tech high school, which means that basically part of their education was focused on technological literacy, we had to learn how to use IBM mainframes, and oh my god. As an entire side tangent, and this is really more of me just ranting on this, it does bother me a lot that Gen Alpha and Gen Z, it's being reported that they don't know how to navigate modern computers. And this is coming from the simplification of things like phones and iPads. They don't know how nested files work and other things along those lines. That deeply worries me because computers are an ever-evolving part of our life, and the simplification of them is good in some ways, but bad in others. Adding a mouse and modern GUI so you don't need to navigate through terminal commands, or, God forbid, the console. I'm looking at you, Linux users. It's a good thing. But the Fisher-Priceification of modern computer tasks being essentially simplified to their bare bones for Gen Z and Gen Alpha really worries me. Like, they're very fluent in internet culture and technology culture, don't get me wrong, but when it comes to computer operations and computer tasks, there is a recorded growing technological illiteracy within that generation, and it does worry me. Ol' Hickory. Boomer neighbor now in jail because she thought she bought a view and quiet in a subdivision. Boomer freak out. Boomer lady that lives 2 down from me. Bought early in our neighborhood. There were 2 empty lots by her. It's a golf course community. Her property, however, only backs into some woods between holes. I bought the property 2 down that sits in the green. She could see the green when the lots were empty, but after the houses were built, she could see less, but she could still see. The lot between us sold and a family moved in. They and us have 5 little kids. We both had the builder put in a fence. The fence was installed into the buffer zone between the golf course and our property owned by the HOA. Almost every other house in the neighborhood has a fence or bushes in the buffer. It mostly exists for the drainage. Only rule is no structures in it. Me and the other new house have a few kids each. They play outside, but much less than I did their age, but some. Lady is pissed we built houses in empty lots in a half-finished subdivision. Says we stole land for our fence. She also thinks she's entitled to country quiet living on an O2 anchor lot. She starts harassing me and my neighbor. First, little things. She turned me into the HOA for something in my backyard, which puzzled me. She called the cops because the kids were playing outside at 3 p.m. on a Saturday. She filed a complaint against our realtor. The neighbor, on the other side, abruptly moved. Probably another story there. She really took it out on the wife next door. She was afraid of the husband. They ended up getting a restraining order, but she doesn't stop. She walked into their yard and filmed them through their windows. They got her arrested and charged with a felony. Was offered a deal if she'd sell and move, but she wouldn't take it, and out on bail started screaming at the kids in the backyard again. Bail revoked and she's in jail. House is now for sale. Too long didn't read Boomer's in jail because she thought she owned 2 empty lots next door and went insane when she realized she didn't. In a lot of developing communities, oftentimes they'll give you a big massive disclaimer on the closing that the current state of the developed community is not the final state and you're going to have construction and noise nearby. They also heavily warn you that if you're buying for the view, it might be blocked by incoming houses being developed. So she didn't read her contract, because I guarantee that was in her because that's usually there so the HOA doesn't get sued, nor the developer. Plus, if the HOA allowed the fence, chances are they've already done their paperwork to make sure the fence was actually allowed. Now, her yelling and screaming at the kids and filming through windows, yeah, she got what she deserved being in jail. Also, I find it wildly ironic that a lot of older generations, like kids these days, only want to be on their phones and their iPads. Wait, kids playing outside at 3 p.m.? They should be inside! What the hell? Meanwhile, they're all inside on Facebook and reposting AI Jesus images of, oh, this kid built a Jesus statue out of soda cans and shrimp, because it's also his birthday. You haven't seen any of those, that is definitely a hell of a rabbit hole to go down. Boomer mad I won't let him screw us over on an old house his father built. Boomer's story. Long story short, we bought a house from a son whose father built it and died here, almost 60 years. Before closing, he goes on a long rant about the shed out back that he and his father built and blah blah blah. He says he wants to have the shed removed because of sentimental reasons. Whatever, I agree. Flash forward a few months later after closing, the first week we're here it rains. I discover a roof leak from the garage. No big deal, the roof is 10 years old. Looks to be in good shape, so probably just needs a repair, right? I call a roofer who tells me although my roof looks like it's newer and in good shape, it was installed completely wrong. A list of stuff wasn't installed correctly. I text the old owner and ask him who did the roof. He says that he did. Mind you, I thought 10 years ago they had a roofing company replace it like most people do. Anyway, I tell him our less than 10-year-old roof is fucked. It needs to be totally replaced to the tune of $18,000. I tell him he's fucked up for not telling us that he did it and he knows it wasn't done correctly. No starter, ice and water, a few other things. He was aware we're getting married that fall and we're saving for the wedding in addition to buying a house. I tell him if he's a Christian man like he claims, he should do the right thing and kick in for the roof to be done right. Mind you, he sold this house for $350,000. No mortgage on it. And the house on the side of it, his aunt owned for the same amount. This scumbag had the nerve to tell me he's not going to do that. So I say fine, I'm not going to keep my end of the bargain of him arranging to have the shed he wants moved. He loses his mind. He writes me a 2-page email how he's going to turn all the boomer neighbors against us, the young couple on the street, and a bunch of other crap of how we're terrible people and stole memories he made with his father. I told him in a short reply he can go fuck himself. If the neighbors are going to be on his side, that's fine. They can fuck themselves too. He got a taste of his own medicine and couldn't deal with it. Boomers equal the greediest, nastiest, lying, entitled scumbags I have ever met on this earth. I could never do anything to a young couple starting a family like what this scumbag has done to us. The guy is wealthy, mind you, and still feels entitled to fuck kids starting out. Note, we did have it inspected, and from what the inspector wrote visually, it looked good. Not really interested in going after the inspector. He did a decent job and found stuff we didn't. More or less told this scumbag the shed is ours now. We paid for a new roof already. The shed is probably worth $9,000, half the price of the roof, so it makes me feel better about this situation. This might be the first time where I don't think the boomer's in the wrong. Genuinely. You hired an inspector, the inspector did not do his job, and you tried putting it on the previous homeowner after you had already signed off on the house. From the verbiage you stated, you had it inspected. You hired the inspector. It would be different if he hired the inspector and had an under-the-table deal to get things done and it kind of, screwed you over in the process, but it sounds like you hired this inspector, the inspector didn't do his job, you had a roof leakage and you tried to pin it on the previous owner. That's not how that works. Then on top of that, you went back on a previous agreement because your inspector fucked up. I think you're the asshole here. Genuinely. Yeah, the boomer might being boomer and is a little entitled here, but at the same time, you're equally as entitled as he is. And what the fuck is with that Christian guilt shaming, dude? If you're a Christian, you'll pay for my roof leakage that my inspector didn't find. But my inspector, he's a good guy. So I'm not gonna go after him. Instead, I'm going after the previous owner. Yeah, it sucks that he lied to you and told you that he had the roof professionally done when he did it himself. However, the inspector should have found that because that's his fucking job. I feel weird about this because this might actually be the first time where I'm siding with the boomer. Coffee Ape. Boomer mad because I didn't connect her computer to her home Wi-Fi. This episode's just full of tech nightmares, ain't it? Boomer's story. Happened a few years ago. Boomer at work, who has been requesting a new laptop, finally received one. After prepping it, I met with her at work and got her set up on it. Logged in, signed into all apps, synced OneDrive, the whole shebang. I got her hooked up to the work's Wi-Fi too. She was going to finish her day remote at home. She was happy. I gave her good customer service, the kind that a lot of boomers like. Now, tell me why this fool calls me back an hour later, livid, yelling that I'm delaying her work and forgot an important thing, connecting her laptop to her home Wi-Fi. I put that shit on speaker and asked her again what was the problem. My team was cackling. Coffee Ape, why didn't you connect her laptop to her home Wi-Fi when you met her here at work? Don't you know her Wi-Fi password and SSID? She overheard that and thanked my coworker for calling me out on my short-sightedness. I told her I wouldn't know that to begin with, and that's the problem between her and her ISP, if she forgot her home Wi-Fi password. She said, and I quote, "Aren't you my internet provider?" I checked out. I told her to call the cable man and talk to my boss for a complaint. She fired off an email to her boss and my boss. Her boss stops by and hands me a bag of M&Ms a few days later, apologizing on the boomer's behalf. My boss didn't say anything to me about the incident. My coworkers gave me shit for a few months, and that was funny. And yes, if you're wondering, you can technically preemptively connect a device to a network it doesn't have direct access to. It's a bit of a finicky pain in the ass, and I've personally never had luck with it, but it is possible. The problem in question comes down to the expectation that he would have known the home network's Wi-Fi, and honestly, the problem here isn't even the boomer asking him to connect her computer to her home Wi-Fi, because that's something that she probably would not have known about. The problem is her trying to write him up for not doing it after he explained that it was not within his purview of something he could do. That's where the problem arises from. Again, it's okay to be technologically illiterate as long as you are willing to receive help. But also this goes both ways. If you are dealing with someone who is technologically illiterate, you gotta be patient with them, as frustrating as it can be. I mean, hell, when I used to do community service in high school, one of the things we used to do is go to retirement homes or just general care facilities and help the elderly with their computers. And oftentimes we were being brought, like, these old laptops with Windows XP on them and having to walk them through basic steps like connecting to the internet or opening a browser or just general tech support help. And yeah, it can be definitely frustrating telling the person 5 times to do the same thing over and over again. But again, they did not grow up with that technology, and I understand that. And it was always something where, even as frustrated as I gotta keep a kind face. And it always pissed me off when other kids who went to my high school or were helping the elderly got frustrated or annoyed and were aggressive and mean about it. And that's not okay. It still haunts me to this day that there was some poor elderly lady who brought in their laptop and needed help with their printer, and I could not figure it out for the life of me. That thing was fucking possessed, I swear to God. After like an hour of trying to help this poor old woman print photos of her grandkids, and she had wheeled down her laptop and printer, and I tried everything, I could not figure out what the hell that printer was on. All about chemistry. Boomer furious. I didn't correct him misgendering my baby. Boomer freak out. I was at the supermarket finishing up my groceries when this old man approached my baby. She was kicking like crazy and lifting her foot to try to chomp at it. Now, here's the thing. Her stroller is yellow with giraffes on it, and she was wearing a light green onesie. This man comes and says, "Hey there, big boy. Are you gonna be a soccer player? I think you will. Look at him kicking. Are you a Madrid's fan?" And kept going about the Madrid soccer team. I just smiled and went away. On another haul, I didn't realize he was behind me and I was talking to my baby, calling her by her name. He came to me and tapped me on the shoulder. "She's a girl?" "Yeah." "Why didn't you say something?" Now, I was going to say it didn't matter, they all look the same at this age. She's just too happy with people engaging and talking to her, plus she could be a soccer player too. But I only gotta say, it doesn't matter. And he started screaming at me. "This is the problem with you radical leftists. You should be ashamed of yourself. She doesn't even have earrings. How can people know she's a girl? You and your people want to create an army of trans people to destroy traditional families." At this point, I already started walking away and not engaging because I've learned that from you folks. He still said something about someone needing to call social services on me. When I was paying, the cashier asked what the fuck was going on, and I explained. She said that she and her manager are pissed because this guy already yelled at a group of customers, the other day being a group of teenagers. What a sad existence, going out to yell at strangers. Shrug emoji. Added to add the best part that I forgot, he also yelled when I was leaving, girls should wear pink at all times, like WTF, my dude. I could maybe understand if he was embarrassed by it and just trying to be really kind about it and being like, hey, like, I'm sorry for getting, like, the gender of your baby wrong. But instead, the whole tirade and then also talking about babies getting their ears pierced. Please tell me that's not a regular thing. Because that seems wrong on like multiple levels. Like beyond the pain you're subjecting the child to for their earrings, the second thing that comes to mind is if that baby has a metal allergy, and while rare, still possible, they have no way of communicating with the parents that something is wrong. Are they crying because they're hungry, their diaper's full, they're tired, they're cranky, they want to do something else? You got no way of knowing that their crying is from the ears. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong and it turns out that getting babies' ears pierced is extremely common and I'm just like the weird one here, but to me that sounds odd. That sounds really, really odd and like not okay. Also, if it's not wearing pink or blue, I'm probably just going to upfront ask if it's a boy or a girl because I got no way of knowing. All babies can like animals and giraffes and wear the color green. No one really knows. Maybe that baby just likes green. Maybe they don't cry as much when they're wearing green. I don't know. Do babies cry when they're wearing colors they don't like? God. Hey, welcome to the outro. Don't forget this whole thing is basically brought to you by GamerSupps. If you like caffeine, then I can't recommend GamerSupps enough. Use code Oz at checkout to support the channel. And I do actually use this product. It's replaced all other sources of caffeine for me because I feel good. It doesn't have any of that extra stuff that a pre-workout blend might have. It's with a couple of the extra things to make it so you don't crash as hard. It's good. I like it. Personally, if you really want a good flavor, try the Soda Pressing Pear or even the Dragon Fruit Punch. Those two are my personal favorites right now.